Hi, Andrew. Welcome to Venture with Grace.
Hey, Grace, thanks for having me.
To start the show, I would love to just say I feel like my entire HumanX experience was like so good, just because I feel like it was such a high quality conference that like everyone were like just like literally some of the most influential people in tech and in venture and everything. I just want to say you guys did such a good job. And then as a COO of the company, please tell us more about like maybe we start with like your background. I'm sorry, I'm just like so overwhelmed by the experience. It was like in a good way. But anyway, okay. So after school, I mean, you are a two-time founder. Maybe we start with your founder journey.
Yeah,
How
totally.
do you start it, and then how do you get involved with like HumanX?
Yeah, definitely. Well, thanks so much for having me. Really excited to be here, and really glad to hear that you had a great HumanX experience. Um, for me, I grew up in New York City, and I always wanted to be a founder. I always wanted to start something. So when I was younger, I had a lemonade stand, and was always kind of making my friends work. Sometimes longer than they wanted to, just to do something that I felt like had my imprint on it, impacted other people, and I'm a little bit of a Type A control freak, so also something that I could control and run and kind of do my way. And I think that's kind of permeated a lot of what I've done. I went to a brand new high school in New York called Avenues, where I started a nonprofit during high school. And so we actually were able to take a block out of our schedule that you would typically use for, extracurriculars or, things that weren't part of the core curriculum, like art or gym or things like that, and use it on kind of a passion project. And so for me, what started as kind of like a business idea turned into a nonprofit, which turned into a food truck. Unfortunately, I didn't have a license, so that quickly turned into a food cart. And so my friend and I ran a nonprofit food stand in a market on the Lower East Side of Manhattan called Hester Street Market. And we did that for about 6 months and donated the money to a local food pantry that helps serve local New York residents near Chelsea. So that was kind of my first foray into starting my own venture, figuring out what that meant, really understanding like, what is the CapEx involved in starting a business. This was before kind of my interest in tech, but more just my interest, I think, in building something. When you walk around New York, the streets are so lively, and a lot of that is due to the commerce, that the shops that are there and kind of what's going on. And so I think from a young age, I always wanted to kind of have that impact on a community, on people. But I didn't really know what that looked like from a business perspective and from kind of my interest and skill set. And then going to Stanford, obviously that shifted very heavily to tech. And so I learned a lot about tech and kind of like, obviously software is eating the world, all of these things. And I said, okay, tech is interesting. I tried to go down the kind of CS coding path, took a few classes in that, ended up with a focus on data science within my political science major, but computer science.
Hi, Daniel. Anyway, keep going. Sorry.
Yeah, so all good. So ended up focusing on data science there, and then worked on a series of tech startups in big tech and a whole bunch of different industries while I was at Stanford and during my summers. And what I found was that I really enjoyed being at a startup. Actually, Daniel was one of the people I worked for back in high school.
Love
Uh,
that. That's crazy. Wait, Daniel is a longtime friend. I haven't seen him for a
yeah,
couple years.
we were like tangential family friends. It's just how we got connected. And I worked on his first startup, Rentity. So it's great to kind of have the same people continue to be working in the same space. And I joined a startup out of undergrad. Excuse me,
Hope
little
you're well.
post HumanX cold.
Oh,
Uh,
I feel you.
but yeah, I joined a startup out of undergrad that ended up getting acquired. And so tried to launch my own company. I did launch my own company, raised from family and friends and some angels. And it was a company called Silo, where we basically took phone booths that you see in office spaces. We retrofitted them with some hardware and software so that you could basically use them by the minute, kind of like how you would use a city bike. And then we built partnerships with coffee shops all around Manhattan and Brooklyn, so remote workers could take advantage of this. Did that for about a year and a half. The goal was always like a B2C moving to a B2B model.
Mhm,
I think I learned the hard way, like a lot of the things first-time founders do. The consumer market's oversaturated. Don't touch hardware if you're trying to raise venture dollars.
mhm,
Um, and and I think most importantly, big contracts, a
mhm,
few contracts that are big and not
mhm,
a ton of like microtransactions. It's just a lot
mhm,
harder to gain traction that way. And so a lot of that I think set the stage for what I did with HumanX, because
mhm,
we're very much the exact opposite. I
mhm,
run sponsorships at HumanX, and so a lot of our contracts are 5-6 figure contracts, some seven
mhm,
figure contracts. But really the goal there is like, how do we deliver an outstanding experience to our,
mhm,
to our sponsors? And so it was very much a deviation from, hey, pay us $2 for 1 minute in this phone booth to
mhm,
sign the 6-figure contract.
mhm,
And I can definitely say that as a founder, that's what I would recommend, unless
mhm.
you think you're building the next Facebook or something like that. But
Mm. I just wanna say I'm so impressed by, like there's, like, so many, like, top brands who are there, and I feel like especially selling sponsorship, like, running a media company myself, I feel like that's, like, a full-time job on its own, like, on, like, sales and then building a product, programming and everything. And I wonder, like, how do you I guess, like okay, so at HumanX, there's obviously people that are, like, doing all the programming, and then you're doing sales, and then I feel like sales is such a crucial like, component, like, but before you actually have the conference on its own, like, what as it goes into it to, like, sell? Because I think, like, from my experience as running my own media company, I feel like a lot of it depends on, hey, like, do you have the speaker yet? But if you don't have the sponsorship, how do you get the speaker if like they come and then we have no venue? So like I guess like how do you think about the progressing of that? And then also I think yeah, like one part about like sponsorship is like I feel like hope you're okay.
I'm
Hope you
okay.
can recover. Like yeah.
No
And
worries.
so it's like GTC. So like GTC and GDC happening in the Bay Area. I
Oh
feel like
man.
everyone's like kind of in the basically next week everyone will be sick, I feel like. Um so I wonder so like how do you think about the sales journey just cuz like you have to like I think it's very different than like if you're selling a newsletter ad or podcast ads because you can always roll out stuff. But for the conference, like everybody have to show up on the same day. And then I feel like another problem is like people would just like last minute canceling or like, need something else. And then I guess like number one is like what is like how do you sell without actual having a product doing the demo and stuff. Obviously, you guys have such a good track record before for other conference, but track record is one thing. The other thing, it's like, people will always ask you who is coming, right? So like how do you kind of like answer these kind of questions without even having a program at the beginning?
Yeah, definitely. It is very much a chicken and the egg.
Exactly.
It's
Yeah.
a three-sided marketplace, if you
Mhm,
will. It's the sponsors, it's the speakers, and it's the attendees.
mhm,
And that's kind of if you're leaving the operation stuff to the side, the
mhm,
venue, all of that. Um, obviously for us, as you mentioned, like the track record, super helpful. We can point to Money 2020, to Shop Talk, to Health, and say like, hey, our co-founder John Weiner did all these things. This is kind of what we're
mhm,
aiming to be, and so
mhm,
they can kind of see what this could look like, in
mhm,
3, 5, 7 years.
mhm,
Um, I think the other piece of it is, we had a really exceptional operations team who was able to envision like what these
mhm,
activations would look like, whether
mhm.
it's turnkey booths. So all of our booths are completely turnkey.
What is
Except for,
turnkey?
yeah, so that's a great question. Turnkey is basically like you buy a booth and you just show up and everything is done for you. So
Oh, okay.
out kind of the size and there may be a few different designs you can choose from, but everything from the electrical to the building of it and taking it down, everything is done for you. So, instead of having your event team come in a day, 2 days
Mhm,
early, having to manage their contractors to ship something in and
mhm,
build it and all of that, you basically
mhm,
don't have to think about it. You can show up a few hours before and
mhm,
you just send us your graphics that you want on each of the panels and it's done for you. So I think that's one thing that we've just gotten amazing feedback from. And that's, learning over time of,
mhm,
we can kind of deliver this inclusive experience where you don't have to
mhm.
think about these other things. You're not, getting nickel and dimed on kind of like each aspect of it. So I think that was one piece. I mean, I think the other one, is very much applicable to all startups, which is
Mhm.
like at the end of the day, you're selling the dream and the vision, uh,
Mhm.
and you have to deliver on that, obviously, or you're not going to get
Mhm.
a recurring contract, whether that's a recurring sponsorship contract or a recurring SaaS fee or AI usage fee or whatever the
Mhm.
market is shifting to these days. But
Mhm.
um, but yeah, I mean, I think like, in a sense, you are selling a little bit of the vaporware. And it's the
Mhm.
same, whether you're building an event or you're building a tech company or anything else,
Mhm.
where, you're hoping that you can deliver on something and you're planning to deliver on it. But, we plan and God laughs, right? So I'm super, super grateful that we were able to deliver on that. And it's
Mhm.
great to hear anecdotes like yours where you had such a great experience, because obviously that was our goal and that's what we were shooting for,
Mhm.
but you never know what's going to happen. So that's really special that people kind of came away with these really meaningful interactions and experiences. And it's
Mhm.
something that we're definitely going to look to double down on, in the future events.
For sure. I wonder, so like I guess like for the conference itself, like I guess from selling sponsorship perspective, like there's like I guess like so many people at each big tech company. Let's say like you guys have amazing collaborator like Google, like Amazon, like literally all the big tech. And then how do you kind of initiate these conversations? Like are those like warm intro from to the marketing team directly, or like would it be for like the speaker themselves? Just because a lot of people would, I guess like the speaker themselves like would want to, I guess like, are they the point of contact, or was it more of like a marketing person and then they just like bottom up to like push it forward?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and actually reminds me of something I wanted to mention in my last response, which is, you have a little bit of this flywheel in
Mhm.
the same way that you do with a social network or something else,
Mhm.
which I think
Mhm.
makes it a more defensible business in the long run as
Mhm.
well,
Mhm.
because because of what you said, right? It is really hard to get the sponsors,
Mhm.
the speakers, and the attendees together, and so once you're
Mhm.
able to kind of like get that momentum going,
Mhm.
um, obviously you have to do a good job and you have to keep building
Mhm.
on it. And there's always going to be someone who's like, coming for whatever you're building, but and trying to do it in a different way. And you have to be responsive to that. But at the same time, like you're building a really valuable asset that is benefiting, if you benefit all three of these kind of points the right way, they're
Mhm.
going to want to re-engage, or other people are going to want to re-engage. And it's kind of like a
Mhm.
self-fulfilling prophecy in a way that I think people don't necessarily think about events.
Mhm.
But it's the same thing that happens when you think about, a social network or a different kind of like
Mhm.
defensible business, and kind of the moats that traditional VCs think about when they look at tech businesses. So
Mhm.
I think that's one thing that is really interesting, and something that I learned kind of moving from more of the traditional tech space to the event space. Um, I think in terms of, the contacts with your sponsors, it can really be, it's like all of the above, I would say. So,
Mhm.
uh, a few of them were like, we hired salespeople who had relationships, they brought them over.
Mhm.
Um, that can go really well or really poorly. It just depends. Uh,
Mhm.
but that's kind of like a tried and true method that most sales teams, I think, employ when they're early on. Some of
Mhm.
it was like, hey, we have this speaker already committed.
Mhm.
Let's go. They should have some sort of presence here. And I
Mhm.
think that's a natural. It's a natural ask, right? If you are
Mhm.
spending money to send, 5 people to Vegas to um, put them up in a hotel, to pay for their flights, to put someone on stage,
Mhm.
um, you know, it's really not that much of a marginal investment to do something on the sponsorship side, to then
Mhm.
double down and like get even more out of kind of the initial dollars that you're already spending. So I think most companies understand that. And then, um, a lot of it was just honestly cold. We have
Mhm.
an incredible, really energized sales team who has been, doing a ton of outreach. I think for myself as well. So when I was at Primary Ventures prior to starting HumanX,
Mhm.
um, I was a researcher in residence, basically helping run their entrepreneur in residence program. Everything
Mhm.
from like helping to hire and onboard the entrepreneurs in residence to
Mhm.
helping them hone their ideas
Mhm.
to, helping them do their initial sales when we spun
Mhm.
out. There was a cybersecurity company that Primary had incubated that actually only had a CTO. They didn't have a CEO. Our partner
Wow.
was de facto acting as the CEO. And so I was basically acting as like the, head of sales, going
Mhm.
out trying to secure good logos for their design and development partnerships as they built this product. And so
Mhm.
there was a ton of work that I did, both with the primary go-to-market team, but also just in general and learnings on my own of like, hey, how do you get these important these important folks, especially in cyber, which is just such a cutthroat market? How do you get them to pay attention to you? And I think a lot of that grit and those learnings I carried over to help, secure some of our incredible. We were at like 153 sponsors for HumanX year one. So
Oh, wow, 153 sponsors?
yeah,
Oh my god, I'm already dead. I feel like that's a huge number because every 3 days you have to close a deal, right? That's basically
something like
it.
that. Yeah,
Yeah, well, that's crazy.
and
Um
that's events, right? It's like, I mean, I can't tell you how many of them came in
Mhm.
the last 3 weeks. Like
Oh, okay.
probably, I mean, I can't say.
The exact.
Yeah, I mean, I can't give you the exact number, but I would say like, oh man, like 40% of those 153
Wow.
came in the last 3 weeks. And not 3 weeks prior to the event, but like 3 weeks prior to a lot of our deadlines, which was like a month out from the event. So
Um, I again, like another question on that is like, how do you set a deadline? It's kind of like raising a fund. This whole experience of like the B2B SaaS sales, it's kind of like just like a B2B SaaS sales, right? It's like the entire, as a media company founder, I feel like I feel the entire thing just because like, yeah, like if you don't have a deadline, people will just wait until like the last minute. But on the other hand, it's like if you set a deadline too early, then do we have enough to like close this thing? And then how do you set a benchmark on like how much we need? Because you can always take more because like there's like, everything costs so much money. Like I don't know about running about human acts, but like I feel like running like a lot more, I guess like more curated scale of events takes like a lot of money actually. Like, think about like the booze and then the cleanup fee, the chair rental, and then the food management. It's like
oh yeah,
people underestimate how much like you will spend a day to eat stuff because every day, let's say you eat like a $20 salad for lunch and then in the morning you do like a bagel and coffee. That could add up really quick because throughout the day there's also like, snacks, drinks, blah blah blah. And then I
I
feel
don't
like
know,
I just
on base station. I
yeah,
don't know
exactly. It's just
to go
so
over there. That was
crazy.
fun.
Oh no, that's so crazy. And then yeah, you guys have the dog station and then there's like other stuff. And I was like, oh my God, that was like a whole journey on its own. How do you budget out on like how much you need to spend versus like how much do you need to raise to like cover the bare minimum? And then like I guess like how do you even set up the deadline? Because what if like and then do you follow up frequently with the people or like how frequently do you have to like be like, hey, this is our last call. It's the last call. I guess like how do you even think about the entire sales cycle for something like this?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I would say this is very much where like the institutional experience just helps
Mhm,
a ton.
mhm,
So like, what our budget should be, how much we needed to raise, all of these things are very much taken from John's other conferences. So a lot of
mhm,
it is like the playbook that we could run and say like, obviously, inflation is a bit higher.
mhm,
Money 2020 he launched like over a decade ago. So
mhm,
numbers have shifted, but we can go back to historicals and say like how much revenue did Healthier One bring in, how much
mhm,
what was the cost, how much money did they raise, how much money did
mhm,
they go through, and so we can basically look at that and draw at least a rough path of
mhm,
how much we need to bring in, how much we need to spend, all that good stuff. So that's where those things become super helpful because they're a really great guide. Obviously AI is different than healthcare,
mhm,
2025 is different than I think he started at 2016 health. So
mhm,
like things are different, but
mhm,
ultimately like just having that general guide is really helpful. And
mhm,
I think it's a classic like it's a classic trope of second, third, et cetera, time founders where you just have a better sense for like what you're going to burn, what you need to get started. Um, I think that's why funds where they have all of these portfolio operations things, whether it's
mhm,
helping you raise more money, helping you do sales or marketing or hire folks. Those are really helpful both for early stage companies and first time founders. But once you have all those muscles, then starting something for the second time, you already have those kind of built in. And I think we're super lucky that we had a lot of those built in because of my co-founder's other experiences.
For sure. But like I kind of feel like, I guess, what would you say are three unexpected things for the conference to exist that people don't know? Because, or like, you know, what are like the rookie mistakes that you feel like most people would make, but you know, you guys were like successfully avoid?
That's a good question. I mean, I think the first one is, we raised money to help put on an incredible year one.
Mm-hmm.
For a lot of people, it's kind of similar to tech in a lot of ways, where like,
Mm-hmm.
because we have the strong year one, now we're going to scale it even more and go to year two, and we have a really great base and foundation. It's a lot harder, I think, if you try to bootstrap something like this,
Mm-hmm.
and you don't raise money and you can't spend as much on year one, and then you try to kind of like grow year after year, but just with the money that you're bringing in, it becomes a lot harder of a task. And it's a good reason for raising money, I think. And and just it's such a, and we're getting away from it a little bit, except in AI, I would say, but just
Mm-hmm.
such a frothy market overall. It's easy for founders to forget like there's a reason for raising money, not just the announcement and saying, hey, I raised X amount of dollars. But there's actual, like, there should be a strategic plan behind it, more so than like how much cash will VCs give me. And so I think that was something that, like, you don't see many folks doing that in the event space. I think, another thing to think about is just like holistic experience. A lot of people, as you mentioned, we had the dogs, we had massages, like we had, when the bars opened at 4 p.m., we had like liquor. It's not just like beer and wine. Those things are expensive, but they also like pay dividends because people care about them and people care about the experience. And like, I think we're creating events for a younger generation of people who care about connecting outside of just like having a traditional meeting or, going and sitting in some stuffy conference room and shaking hands and like, it's just not how business is done anymore. And I think the events world is starting to catch up, but it's like, how much better is it to connect with someone over petting a dog and then realize, hey, like, these people can invest in your company or they can buy your product, versus, having some sort of like, much more formal, handshake process. And we have platforms where you can have those more structured interactions, but I think building for the unstructured interactions is something that a lot of folks miss in the event space. And I think just in general, like, when people want to connect, people are choosing to be here with their time. They want to have fun and enjoy as well.
For sure. I want to like, I feel like another thing I thought were really interesting is like, okay, so talking about like raising money, I think like for media companies or I don't know if you guys consider as a experience company or like a media company, but I feel like for like a media company, it's like super hard to raise. Like when I chat with like some of the investors, like a lot of people were just saying like, oh, I'll never make money, blah, blah, blah. But I do feel like for obviously like I've heard great things about like your co-founder, like they have sold like literally $100 million businesses before. But like I wonder, like, how do you even think about like the, I guess, like the fundraising journey? Because like people want to see exit, people want to see, yeah, like just like a venture backed return. Like I guess like first of all, like convincing people. For you guys, obviously the track record matters, but like I guess like how do you think about from the fundraising perspective? Like how do you even go about it? Just because I've never seen other people have done this before. Like I've only seen, I don't know, just most people just like bootstrap, right? Or like just like raise crazy sponsorship of some stuff.
Totally. Well, I mean, I think, for us at a high level, it was super easy because we had
The
the relationships, we had
yeah.
the so it was myself and two other co-founders. John obviously came from the event space, so
Mhm.
he's, as you said, been doing this with Money 2020 and Shop Health, and so he was
Yeah.
like pulling those connections. Primary, who was the investor that I was working for before starting HumanX, they had invested in health and in Shop Talk, so for them, they kind of knew what to expect.
Mhm.
And then our other co-founder and our CEO, Stefan, who I think was on this podcast
Last
a week
week.
ago,
Yeah.
he has a long background in tech and in big tech and working at startups more recently, and so they just have an incredible network of folks who were interested in coming in and
Mhm.
supporting them. And then myself bringing with it some of the startup experience, and then also
Mhm.
the Stanford network and being
Mhm.
so tied into Primary's ecosystem and the New York ecosystem. All three of us where we
Mhm.
kind of like sit in different spots, and so I think bringing those together made the fundraising process a lot easier.
Mm. I wonder for like, so since we talk about like the sponsorship and stuff, I wonder like how do you think about like tailor each package to different people? Just because like I think like if we, let's say, like thinking about like creating like a general like list about like, hey, here's like how big is the booth, and then how big is like, I don't know, your logo or like website and stuff. How do you think about like what if people ask you for a bunch of other stuff, like, hey, can we get keynote, can we get like blah blah blah, can we get like, I don't know, the dog sponsorship or something on the dog corner? Like how do you think about people want to add 45 things onto your original package? And then how do you think about like, I guess like the entire journey of like following up? Just because I think a lot of times it's like, um I don't even know how you guys do it, because you guys have over 140 sponsors. That's like very different than like you're running a small company, right? Like, that's like literally the entire pipeline sales cycle, and then you have to like literally manually think of like every single detail about like what this person want, what that person want, and then like mash them together. Do you
Yeah.
have like a general, like I guess like a general checklist for yourself, or like do you have, I guess like how do you like manage to tailor everything to like all these different people?
Definitely. So the first thing is we don't really do packages. So it's all a la carte. It's all what folks want to achieve. So
Mhm,
we're very much first principles thinkers at HumanX, and
mhm,
so we go back to this first principle of like, what do you want to get out of it? Because people want to get different things out of an event, right? Do you
mhm,
want brand recognition? Do you want lead generation?
mhm,
Do you want something more experiential? So it
mhm,
really depends on what they're trying to get out of it. And when people want to add 45 things, they're more than welcome. We're we're
mhm,
happy to help them achieve that. But internally for us, there's a division of labor where we have an amazing operations team, as I mentioned, and so they do a lot of the work around. Once the contract is signed, they jump in to say, we need your graphics. These are what the details are. They're like the conduit between the
mhm,
sponsor and the company we use to help
mhm,
set everything up, and the ones who are receiving all of the graphics and helping build things. So they're really incredible. They're super experienced from some of John's other events and just being in the event space for
mhm,
decades. And so that really frees up the sales team to make sure that they're going out, and the second the deal is closed, while they own the relationship, like they should be going out and finding more deals.
mm,
So that division of labor is super helpful,
mhm,
and kind of just like freeing up folks' time.
mhm,
Um, and yeah, and then it's just like going back and thinking through like, are we helping you achieve what you want to achieve? Because,
mhm,
at the end of the day, that is going to be what sticks in the brains of the leadership of whatever company
mhm,
is sponsoring. And so whether they decide to make this, a long-term relationship or a short-term relationship
mhm.
will really depend on if we're achieving those goals. So that's how we think about it ourselves, and how we kind of like benchmark ourselves versus what they're trying to do.
For sure. Also, like I just want to say next year, this is in SF, and then you guys, I'm sure you guys already started preparing for next year as well.
Oh yeah,
Um,
there may also
um,
be a Europe conference involved in that. So
wow. Oh my God, that's crazy. I don't know how you do like this much like crazy stuff. How do you think about like, I guess like another thing is like you mentioned about like um I guess like you have a team, right? So like how do you think about like where do you spend, and then I guess where do you like save, and then how do you manage your team? Is that like each person manage, let's say, 35 accounts or something? Like since you guys have so many accounts, or like maybe each person is doing like a sector, and like how do you even define like who is ideal client? Because I think from a product building perspective, I'm just thinking about HumanX as a product, right? So like from a product building perspective, I think like a lot of people think about like, what's the ICP, and then, who was the original person that you were targeting, and then how do you kind of expand from there? Just because
Mhm.
I think like, and then the buyer journey, it's like also very different, just because like, I think since it is a experience, or like it's a event, so like there's like the marketing, the business, like sales people from the company, or the CTO or whatever. Like how do you think about like who exactly is the ICP? How do you define it? And then how do you, I guess, like come up with like solutions for each of the different, I guess, uh, profile of people?
And just to double down and like make sure I'm understanding, when you say
Mhm.
ICP, are you thinking more about the types of companies themselves that are engaging in sponsorships, or are you thinking about the types of profiles within the companies who are the
I
ones that
think
are using what?
both. I think both, because I think like I've met so many diverse people. Like there is a chief strategy officer of somewhere, or there's like the CEO, and there's a VC, and then there's like just 500 other like different profile people. And I
Yeah,
really love that experience. But I'm just like also on the other hand, like I'm like, wow, that's like so many profile that you have to create a product too, because
yeah,
they would have probably different experience, because as you mentioned, they could want brand recognition, or like lead gen, or like the just overall vibe. I guess like how do you think about creating a product for each one of them, and then maybe from the sales angle, like how do you think about like your product positioning in their entire, I guess, like work experience too?
definitely. I think when it comes to finding the right folks,
Mhm.
one thing there is no shortage of is
Mhm.
AI and data events.
Mhm.
So we are really lucky to be able to kind of like lean on the ecosystem and see what currently exists,
Mhm.
what companies are sponsoring, events that
Mhm.
currently exist, and where are people trying to move, whether it's
Mhm.
like Salesforce launching Agentforce or things like that,
Mhm.
who are kind of positioning their core value prop and their brand around AI,
Mhm.
and those are probably the people that would be interested in working with us. So
Mhm.
that's that's kind of how we look at the landscape, is like who's already investing in this, like where
Mhm.
are marketing dollars going, and if they're already
Mhm.
going to AI and data events, especially if they value in-person events, they're
Mhm.
probably people that we want to talk to. uh,
Mm.
in terms of our market positioning, I think although there are a lot of events, we
Mhm.
found there aren't a lot of events that are like scaled events.
Mhm.
There's
Mhm.
so many. I live in New York City, and there's so many like AI agent events,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
events, business operators, working on AI events. Like the list
Mhm.
goes on, and they're fantastic. And I think
Mhm.
we partnered with some of them at HumanX, and I would love for them to continue to flourish, kind of on the local ecosystem level.
Mhm.
um, but you're not getting like the like all of kind of like the C level from these like super large companies. Maybe you're
Mhm.
getting one or two at this event, one or two at that event, and in part it's because the companies are all based in different geos and all these things.
Mhm.
So there needs to be kind of like a raison d'etre of like why is everyone coming together, and
Mhm.
like what's bringing these folks together. And
Mhm.
that goes back to like the network effect chicken and egg piece of like
Mhm.
if you can do that well, that's what
Mhm.
I think adds a lot of value. Um, so we were like, hey, we're going to do an event that's scaled,
Mhm.
and that will bring the right folks together, we think, and
Mhm.
that will make a more compelling kind of value prop.
Mhm.
And so we're really, obviously thrilled that turned out to be right. This was
Mhm.
kind of a hypothesis that we had sitting in a conference room 18 months ago.
Mhm.
So that's really great to see. I think the other piece is like, to a certain extent, we have very specific content. So, the way we looked at the AI landscape before we dove
Mhm.
in and started this event, Stefan and I went to like, myriad AI events
Mhm.
across the US mainly.
Mhm.
And what we
Mhm.
found was that a lot of the events didn't really have the same like reason of existing. They didn't really have the same value prop that we were delivering, which we felt like was bringing together the right folks, bringing together leadership, whether
Mhm.
that's engineering leadership or business leadership, but to talk
Mhm.
about like the practical tools and implementations that you're using, but
Mhm.
not to get into like the code of it all. We're not like when you were at HumanX, if you went to any of the smaller
Mhm.
sessions, like you didn't really find people with their like laptop open, like coding something
Mhm.
and showing you how something worked. Like that wasn't
Mhm.
really the goal of HumanX. And I think
Mhm.
a lot of the other conferences we saw, they were either, super technical, like NeurIPS, which does a fantastic job of bringing together these
Mhm.
like leading researchers and
Mhm.
scientists. Those people weren't at HumanX, but like
Mhm.
we knew that and we intentionally made that choice because we felt like if we could pick one of the ICPs, we could have a more
Mhm.
cohesive event.
Mhm.
Similarly, there are events like TED AI that does that do a fantastic job, but they're much more about kind of like the media and
Mhm.
getting press, being able to share what you're doing. But they're not as much about like actually getting deals done. How do you get your company funded? How do you get a new customer?
Mhm.
Maybe you'll make a tangential interaction that will lead to something, but it's
Mhm.
not built for that.
Mhm.
Um, Lastly, there are events that are really built around the ecosystem. So, right,
Mhm.
you have obviously NVIDIA GTC that you just mentioned,
Mhm.
Google Next, you have AWS reInvent, you have Dreamforce, you have all these things, and they're fantastic events. And like in many ways, that's our comp. That's how we think about ourselves. And
Mhm.
these are huge, huge events that if we could build the Dreamforce of AI, like
Mhm.
consider this a win. So
Mhm.
we would be very thrilled to do that. But ultimately like the goal of those events, as they
Mhm.
should be, is to increase the value of the ecosystem and the platform by bringing
Mhm.
people together. So you're
Mhm.
not going to see people from AWS like talking
Mhm.
about how to build on top of AWS
Mhm.
at Google Next, and
Mhm.
like vice versa at AWS reInvent, right? And
Mhm.
so we felt like we're not owned by one of the big cloud providers. We're not owned by one of the big AI providers.
Mhm.
We want a place where it's kind of like neutral territory and we
Mhm.
can bring those people together to have those incredible discussions for
Mhm.
business leaders to see where are you getting value, where aren't you getting value, what are the
Mhm.
benchmarks that you need to think about, and then what are the actual like vendors and companies that can take you there. uh,
Mhm.
so that was our goal with HumanX. And we have a survey out for folks
Mhm.
that attended, so hopefully if you're watching this, you should
Mhm.
definitely fill that survey out. But
Mhm.
we'll see if people achieve that and how to kind of double down in 2026 to make sure that wherever we were maybe light on helping business leaders achieve that, we'll put more emphasis on next year.
I have so much question on that. Like, I think that's such a good point on like, helping people do business like within the conference on its own. And I wonder, how do you think about like to accelerate that from happening? Obviously, you mentioned about like, the entire experience. There's like the dog experience, there's like the massage, there is the 4 p.m. drinks experience. And like I wonder, how do you think about like accelerating the conversation from happening? And because I think like you said, like I feel like most conference, though, even they want to bring like let's say all the C-level or leadership within like a room, it's like really hard to actually foster in conversation just because a lot of times you don't really know who is going to be there, and then like you also don't know like I guess like uh when yeah, I feel like it's just like really most of the experience is very one-sided. Like when you go into a conference, you're like learning about like five things about AI agents, but it's not about like hey, here's like what my company does, and then here's what your company does, let's like collaborate on blah blah blah. And I wonder, how do you kind of like fostering or encouraging the conversation from happening in like an event perspective?
Definitely. So I mean, one of the kind of like the key programs that we have,
Mhm.
there are two of them. One is called Venture Connect and one is called
Mhm.
Solution Bridge.
Mhm.
And they focus on connecting two different types of constituencies. So Venture Connect connects, as is in the
Mhm.
name,
Mhm.
VCs and startup founders, to
Mhm.
help the VCs obviously see deal flow and ultimately, hopefully, to make some investments in these companies.
Mhm.
And on the other side, Solution Bridge connects startup founders who are building for enterprises with enterprise buyers who have budget, who have interest, who are trying to figure out how the hell do I figure out, what my AI strategy is, what's the stack
Mhm.
like, and like where can these new players help me plug in and accelerate past my
Mhm.
competitors. So um,
Mhm.
those are super intentional programs. The
Mhm.
Solution Bridge we offer to sponsors, and then folks that are buyers get to attend for free. So that's how we help them kind of encourage
Mhm.
their participation in the program. And then on the other side, Venture Connect, it's a completely free program. Anyone who's a part of
Mhm.
HumanX can join.
Mhm.
And so that's kind of like one way that we know we have these groups of folks that
Mhm.
want to connect and they're
Mhm.
eager to find ways to do that,
Mhm.
and so we facilitate those. The
Mhm.
other thing we have HumanX Connect, which is
Mhm.
our one-to-one like connection program, but for all attendees. So you can message anyone, find find a time to meet with them, and then
Mhm.
there's a lounge where that happens, and there's a table marked, so you can go and find that.
Mhm.
Um, so I would say those are kind of like the key ways that people connect in a structural way outside
Mhm.
of kind of the serendipitous, dog
Mhm.
park drinks, etc.
Yeah.
And then obviously we had our big Wyclef John party on Wednesday night. I don't know if you
Mhm.
were on that, where we had Zouk nightclub rented
Oh
out.
man, I like miss that part. I'm so sad, but like, yeah, as
Yeah,
that as
that's
that person, I feel like we don't really like emphasize on the party scene. So like, I just literally like, yeah, I feel so sad. But like, a lot of people win and they said great things, obviously.
oh good, yeah, and like we actually we ended up having more spots than we could fill, and so we talked to our friends over at FinTech Meetup, which was happening at the same time.
Yeah, I heard it was like a merch party, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, it's just fun to like bring that connectivity to the ecosystem,
Mhm.
and like, maybe you're sharing a drink with someone and then the next day
Mhm.
you realize like, hey, actually they're a good fit for my product. I
Mhm.
think that's like the best outcome that we can hope for. Uh,
Yeah.
so yeah, those are kind of like the core ways that we think about connection at HumanX.
I wonder, so like for like I know that HumanX is such a like a big festival to a degree, but like if you're doing like a smaller, like more tailored things, like how would you recreate that experience for like some like a 1 day conference or like a 1 day event?
That's a good question. I think it comes down to really knowing who your ICP is. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it depends on the scale of the event, but if you had like VCs and startup founders and enterprise buyers, and you're trying to connect all of them, and you have 1 day to do it,
Mm-hmm.
sounds pretty stressful to me. I don't know if that like how feasible that is. It
Mm-hmm.
depends how many people there are, right? Like the startup founders probably want to be
Mm-hmm.
on both sides of the conversation with the
Mm-hmm.
VCs and with the enterprise buyers. Maybe the VCs want to talk to the enterprise buyers. So it can get a little tricky that way. And I think um, just like going back to like core principles of building a startup, right? It's like, who's your ICP for this smaller 1 day event?
Mm-hmm.
Who are you really catering towards? And then make their experience really fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
And then find ways to then bring in like the people that they want to talk to, and like, help make those people's experience great. But at the end of the day, like really knowing who you're building for is
Mm-hmm.
important. Um, we had 3 days to do it, almost four basically, with the Kamala edition. Next year
Mm-hmm.
will be a little bit shorter, which I think a lot of people will be happy about, because I was
Mm-hmm.
maybe I won't get sick next year, but yeah, I mean, I think like the time is really important for allowing those serendipitous connections too, because we had 3,500 people. It's
Mm-hmm.
a ton of people. You're never going to be able to talk to anyone if you're there for 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Um, giving that time is really important. But if you're hosting an event for 100 founders and you're like, hey, I want to bring in, enterprise buyers, because what I'm
Mm-hmm.
promising to these founders are like potential deals,
Mm-hmm.
then that's what you have to focus on. And if VCs come, great. And if they don't, it's fine. So
Mm-hmm.
it's really like, I think trying to keep that core focus as you build whatever you're trying to build, and knowing who you're building for.
Totally. I guess from the attendee perspective, like, I know that you guys like, 3,500 tickets is not easy to sell, I would have to say. And then like HumanX was like also not, you know, a not expensive conference. I mean, in a good way, right? So like I think any good conference will cost some money because it costs a lot to actually build up that really good experience? And how do you think about like, I guess like from a ticket pricing as well as like, you know, how like I guess like what is a sales motion for like a 3,500 ticket selling experience look like? Because I feel like whenever I'm hosting these like 100 people or like 20 people dinners, that's like
Yeah.
already a lot. I don't know like how you, I guess like what is like the sales motion like for ticket sales though?
Yeah. Well, luckily we have a marketing person, so I don't have to get into weeds on it. But I do like know kind of the motions that we went through,
Mhm,
and it's really like, everything you would expect. So it's being on
mhm,
social. It's
mhm,
making sure that like speakers and
mhm,
sponsors have the
mhm,
ability to um, actually go and share like, hey, I'm participating in this on LinkedIn.
mhm,
Trying to like create that buzz in
mhm,
advance of the event,
mhm,
super important for just the awareness, because nobody knew who
mhm,
we were. Like, hopefully
mhm,
now, we had our first event. People seem really happy. They're posting about it. We rang the bell at the stock
mhm,
exchange yesterday. So
mhm.
um,
Congrats.
thank you. Yeah, that was super fun, and
Mhm,
looking forward to partnering more deeply with the New York Stock Exchange. But
mhm,
yeah, I mean, like, hopefully now we don't have as much of that problem, but it's like, how do you break through the noise? And it's and the way you do it is like just constant posting, constant trying to get out there. Everyone who's attending or who's sponsoring or speaking, like, how do you get them to post so that you are leveraging that network? And then it's all the traditional things. It's Google ads. It's having cookies to follow folks around so that like they're
mhm,
seeing a lot of HumanX. It's making sure that um, we're investing the requisite amount in
mhm,
like different ad channels, LinkedIn ads, obviously, like DMing people on LinkedIn via ads. So there's a ton there. We did some other like traditional things too. Like we bought some billboards
oh
during
wow.
AI4, which is a different, like a little bit smaller AI event. Now we can say that it was not the case when we did it, but we got some billboards around AI4, which was happening in Vegas,
Mhm,
to like share more info about HumanX. We did
mhm,
some competitive like messaging. We had a coffee cart outside of the New York AI Summit with branding and free coffee. Ultimately, like those things are awareness plays, so they're super hard to
mhm,
track and they're very expensive. So, for a smaller event, I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. And, whether we even do it next year, I think remains to be seen. But all the traditional kind of like social buying and like social
mhm.
marketing and all of that, that's where I think what drove the highest level of engagement.
For sure. Hi Vince. People love our discussion, by the way. So I want to learn more about like I feel like first of all, like how do you I guess like done the HumanX one this year, like what would be your mental checklist that's like different than prior to like HumanX one? Just because I think like thinking about doing a conference or like running a conference on its own, it's like it's two different things. And like, and then obviously you guys did like such a great job on like, I feel like bringing the people there, it was like, from my experience, it's like every 2 minutes I would run into like someone from my podcast or like someone who was like a just like literally like the top tier executives. And obviously people on my podcast is already a top tier executives, but I'm just saying like in general, the whole experience was like, oh my God, like wow, like literally the entire Silicon Valley, the most important people are there. And then bring people to somewhere like let's say you bring an executive to from Menlo Park to San Francisco, which is like a 30 minutes drive. It's already really hard. And then asking them to fly into Vegas and then like just stay there and then go to the after party is like even harder. So like is there any tips on like, encouraging people to actually show up? And then like how do you like kind of like make people stay after they gave a talk? Because I think that's another challenge. Like I've seen most conference that I ever went to is like speaker fly in, speaker in and out, in and out, in and out. And then how do you like make people stay there for like, a day or two to like, do business with other people?
Yeah, well, we take their ID so they can't leave. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, take their passport too, just in case.
Exactly. No, that's maybe for next year. We didn't have to
Yeah.
take the passports. But I think you're always going to get some people that fly in and fly out. Like, it's the nature of the beast.
Mhm.
But I think it's about, curating. We had such an incredible speaker list, and we have a team that goes after speakers and gets them, and like they do a fantastic job, both speaker and media. And so the goal is really
Yeah.
exactly. And the goal is really to create an environment where people want to like mingle with other folks. I think one thing I was really, usually it's like speakers want to talk to speakers, speakers want to talk to media and press. The amount of speakers I saw like walking around the show floor and wanting to
It's
engage.
crazy. It's like I was like, wow, isn't that the person from my podcast last week? They're there just like walking. Yeah, it's like
So
crazy.
so that, I mean, that's a hard thing to like build. And like, we'll have many retros on like why that happened and how do we continue to foster that. But definitely just like obviously being in the speaker lounge, being able to like network and talk to other speakers while they're there is one thing that keeps speakers around. The other is we had speaker dinners every night. So we invited speakers to have a private dinner. And so, just kind of like giving them a reason to stay. And again, you're never gonna keep everyone, but trying to just build like a really great speaker experience overall, whether it's like connecting with press, connecting with folks that they see as their peers or, potential customers. And hopefully you build something compelling enough that they stay as long as they can.
I guess like, is there anything that you would do differently if you're doing it again? Obviously, you're doing it again, like literally right now. But like, I guess like HumanX 2, like, and compared to HumanX 1, like, what would be the things that you want to like change, or like, what are something that you feel like you should add on?
Yeah. So there's a lot. There's always a lot.
Yeah.
I think one thing that really surprised me was the level of interest in like smaller group sessions. So like Kevin Weil had an interactive session. The CPO of OpenAI, Kevin Weil, had an interactive session following his main stage talk. And, some people were upset because, the room fit maybe 60 people because we wanted it to be intimate and small.
Oh, I didn't know that. Like, I know that a lot of people. I went to like the obviously like the Digits like after party, but like I feel like people were lining up to meet him. Like,
Exactly.
yeah,
So
it was like I would be feared to come out because there was like it was like a lot of people.
yeah, it was a lot of people. And so, and it wasn't just Kevin either. Like we had a ton of people. Like we had Mike Krieger from Anthropic. We had Vinod Khosla. Like, and the lines for smaller sessions were just massive.
Yeah, so they had a smaller session afterwards. Is that like in the backstage or is this like outside?
No, it was on the fourth floor. So it was like on a different floor.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, I mean, so one of the things that we've done, I think, a little differently is like we offer to our speakers to have these smaller interactive sessions where both like people get to hear from these influential folks, and then also they get to actually hear from people that are building on their products and like get real customer feedback. And so that, and it's interactive, right? It's inherently a dialogue and not just like a monologue and Kevin sitting there talking. And because it was so popular, there was this massive line where like hundreds of people couldn't get in. And in general, like we're thrilled that it was super popular. And we pride ourselves on trying to like make sure there isn't a lot. Like there were really no, if you notice, like we didn't have lines for food, we didn't have lines to check in. Like
Yeah, it was so good. Like, and then the food, like everything was so organized, and like all the food were like top notch. It was like I don't know, that's Fontainebleau, not Four Seasons. But I'm just like giving like a example. I feel like it's very like Four Seasons experience, basically.
Totally. And so I think like finding ways, maybe if we have Kevin or someone like Kevin back who everyone wants to meet, finding ways to like flag to people in advance, like, hey, you're not gonna be on the list. You're not gonna make it in. So like, don't wait online. Or, hey, can we do like 2 or 3 sessions with him where we're not kind of harming the integrity of a small group conversation that I think is the value that we were actually adding. But we can kind of offer that to more individuals. So things like that, I think are really good learnings. And, for us, this was our first year doing it, obviously. We thought the main stage and like the the larger talks would be super well attended. and we didn't know about the smaller talks. Like, would people be interested to hear from like a McKinsey workshop on how to deploy AI, or like all of these kind of smaller things? And the answer was like, people were thrilled to hear about these small group discussions. They really wanted to be in like a smaller group setting where they could connect with people. And so I think investing a lot more into that is something that we're going to be doing. How we do it, we'll I'll let you know after our team. But that's on the roadmap.
For sure. I want to be mindful of time, and then I want to wrap with like a quick 1 minute fire run. Okay, what's your favorite book?
Ooh, that's a great one. I really love. I'm not going to give you a book, but I'll give you a series of books, which is
Mhm.
all of the like books from Simon Sinek, like Start with
Mhm.
Why.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, those I think those are really fantastic, and
Mhm.
I think go back to some of the initial questions that we were talking about around like thinking through your ICP, like why do you do things, how do you motivate a team, how do you deliver value to people.
Mhm. For sure. Okay. So I was just like thinking about the entire like what's in the book collection. Sorry, brain dead. Anyway, so who made the biggest impact in your career?
Oh, what a good question. I mean, I think people of my generation, like from people that we don't know, look up to someone like a Steve Jobs, obviously.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, and I mean that it's a little bit overblown, but like
Mhm.
that's yeah, that's kind of like high level people.
Mhm.
Someone that I look up to. I think like on a more personal note, I had like several angel investors in my first company, Silo, whether it was like Rich Menendez, who was one of the founders of One Medical and helped scale
Mhm.
that. Denise Browder, who was like a longtime Goldman Sachs alum, and then helped build out this remote working company. Christoph Wittig, the founder of Hornet, which is like a gay social networking app, and then Kim Denny, who was one of
That's
my
such
first.
a good name. I'm so sorry, but Hornick? That's such a good name. Keep going.
Yeah,
Sorry.
it's a great one. No, all good. And then Kim Denny was one of my first managers at Microsoft when I was interning there.
Mhm.
Just like a fantastic person, I think is a really great like manager and leader. And I think about a lot of the things that I learned there often.
Mm. Who would invite to your dinner party?
Um, I would love to have a deeper conversation with Kamala Harris.
Mhm.
I just it was like it was very quick
Mhm.
and brief, kind of like a meet and greet, and obviously hearing
Mhm.
her speak. But I'd love to like have a more private conversation and like
Mhm.
actually see what she's thinking.
Mm. Where can we find you outside of work?
Sorry.
Where can we find you outside of work?
Ooh, where can you find me outside of work? Like the gym or spin class.
Oh wow, spin class.
And then just like wandering around NoHo and Soho and the West Village.
Flax, New York people. Anyway, Andrew, thank you so much for coming on the show today. It was such a fun conversation.
Yeah, thank you, Grace, for having me. This was great.
Let me quickly